Coming up, the Gone Too Soon series highlights dismal numbers for life expectancy among Montana's native population. Plus, we speak with land defender and climate change activist Tara Houska about the importance of sharing Indigenous knowledge in a warming planet. And fresh off writing a book, ICT national correspondent Mary Annette Pember talks about reporting on boarding schools over the last 3 decades. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amidawa Hopa, thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Arizona, where a $10 billion, 550-mile-long wind-generated electricity transmission line has stopped construction due to backlash from local tribes. A lawsuit is accusing the U.S. Interior Department and the Bureau of Land Management of not recognizing the cultural significance of the San Pedro Valley to nations including the Tohono Hopi, Zuni, and Western Apache. The Tohono Nation, the San Carlos Apache Reservation, and the Center for Biological Diversity and Archaeology Southwest are listed as plaintiffs in the lawsuit filed last week. They claim that the case for protecting this landscape is clear, with Archaeology Southwest calling the San Pedro Arizona's last free-flowing river. Work on the line halted briefly back in November amid pleas by tribes to review environmental approvals for the San Pedro Valley. But it has since resumed in what Tohono Chairman Verlin Housea characterized as a, quote, punch to the gut. The transmission line is also being questioned before the Arizona Court of Appeals. Moving internationally, Indigenous advocates and nonprofit groups in Australia are calling for reform to youth prisons amid allegations of abuse. A letter written to Australia's Victorian government accuses officials of missing deadlines to implement minimum safeguards outlined in Australia's obligation under UN protocol. Optional Protocol to the Convention Against Torture, or OPCAT, is an international agreement aimed at preventing torture, as well as cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander advocates are holding law enforcement responsible for reports of mistreatments, including solitary confinement, excessive use of force, partially clothed searches, and more. According to Raise the Age, an advocacy organization who wants to change the Australian criminal arrest age from 10 to 14, says despite Indigenous people comprising 3.8% of the population, 65% of children are in youth prisons. Well, earlier this week, the Academy Awards announced its 2024 Oscar nominations. Blackfeet and Nez Perce actress Lily Gladstone made history, not just for Hollywood, but for Indian country. ICT's Mackenzie Allen Charmley tells us what she was nominated for and why it is monumental.
Blackfeet actress Lily Gladstone has made history as the first Native American woman nominated for Best Actress in the 2024 Oscars. Her nomination is for her role as Molly in Killers of the Flower Moon, a film depicting the real-life murders of Osage Nation citizens in 1920s Oklahoma. While she's the first Native American in this category, there have been previous Indigenous nominees like Mixtec and Triqui actress Yalitza Aparicio for the film Roma, and Maori actress Keisha Castle Hughes for the film Whale Rider. So far, no Indigenous or Native American actor has won an Academy Award for acting. However, in 2020, Cherokee actor Wes Studi received an honorary Oscar recognizing his lifetime achievement to motion picture contributions. Support for Gladstone's achievement has poured in online, with many sharing photos and kind messages in her honor. Gladstone recently won a Golden Globe in January, becoming the first Native American to win, and delivered a powerful speech using her language. Gladstone also won a Nation Board of Review Award for her role in Killers of the Flower Moon. The film totals 10 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director for Martin Scorsese. You can cheer Gladstone and her historic nomination on during the 96th Academy Awards on March 10th.
Gladstone isn't the only Native person nominated for an Oscar. Osage singer Scott George was also nominated for Best Original Song, called A Song for My People, which is featured in the closing dance scene of Killers of the Flower Moon. George is the first Osage citizen to ever be nominated for an Oscar, according to Osage News. Above the Medicine Line, a new series of programs is aiming to help day school survivors in New Brunswick, Canada. The Wolastoqey Tribal Council was awarded a $100,000 grant to conduct the healing programs, which will range from cultural events to gatherings of survivors. Day schools located on 6 of the Wolastoqey communities first opened in 1881, with the last one closing in 1985. Other projects are coming online in the wider New Brunswick area, with the McLean Day School Settlement Corporation managing a $200 million fund for healing projects. In a galaxy far, far away, the Ojibwe language will soon be spoken. Disney's Lucasfilms is collaborating with the Dakota Ojibwe Tribal Council and the University of Manitoba to create an Ojibwe dub of the original sci-fi classic Star Wars: A New Hope. Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, and C-3PO are amongst some of the characters that will be speaking Anishinaabe-Moan in the film. And yes, even the famous line, "May the Force be with you," will be dubbed. The classic film has been translated in over 50 languages since 1977. The Navajo version was dubbed in 2013 and is available for streaming on Disney+. The auditions for Ojibwe script translation, voice actors, and sound recording will take place in Winnipeg later this year. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Tara Houska is a Couchiching land defender and climate activist who has spent her life fighting for the rights of Indigenous people and their lands. ICT spoke with her about her work and the importance of Indigenous knowledge in the wake of climate change. Take a look.
I think what we're really trying to do is to build the kind of world we want to see while we're still fighting to protect and defend our territory and our land and our culture. I mean, essentially, like we are a people of the land, and if we don't have our land, how can we practice our traditional ways? How do we, our language and all of that are so deeply intertwined with our land, and our water. But also recognizing that I think, it's not just about pushing back and fighting. It's also about trying to build, and we work really hard to build community, to basically live what we are asking for, which is work based in land, based in mutual aid, in as much cultural and traditional life ways as possible. We're basically really trying to live out what decolonization looks like in the 21st century. There's like the statistical analysis, right, that we are impacted first and worst by climate change. We are people who, in various capacities around the globe, in various stages of colonization around the globe, are still deeply entrenched with the land, right? A lot of our life ways and practices still depend on this connection that we have, and the understanding and knowledge that we carry. So when it comes to the world's ecosystems collapsing and what's happening in our backyards at this point, right? Like, I think we've been insulated pretty largely as quote unquote North America or Turtle Island from a lot of the experiences of the global South over the last few decades, but it's here now too. right? And we're seeing like fire tornadoes and the ocean on fire and just so much destruction. I mean, we had, I'm calling you from my traditional homelands up on the border of Ontario, and it was now Minnesota, and it's like there's green grass at Christmas. It's something that's happening in very real time, and it is an issue that I feel like we are disparately experiencing, while simultaneously also disparately experiencing extractive industry. We are the places and spaces that people do not see oftentimes, and we're the places and spaces that bear the brunt of, oh, well, now we're going to do the green energy transition. Well, where's that? Where are those precious minerals coming from? They're coming from Indian country, like they're coming from places that are still intact or largely intact. Or the pipeline gets put through the drinking water of the Standing Rock people. The pipeline gets put through the drinking water of the Ojibwe people over here. I mean, it's a reality that I think we both face, and we face head on as Native folks, because we do still have so much knowledge and understanding. I oftentimes will cite the statistic that we are less than 5% of the world's population, holding 80% of its remaining biodiversity. That's Indigenous peoples all over the world. I mean, clearly we have an understanding of life that is far, far, far more in balance. I'm not saying that we are not also experiencing colonization, that we are not also engaging in practices that are not in balance, but on the overall trajectory of where we're at in the world, I mean, just that fact alone should be more than enough for, I think, the world's leaders and leading thinkers and discussion makers and decision makers that are addressing climate crisis to wonder and think about, shouldn't we be empowering these people that are still living with healthy ecosystems? Shouldn't we be codifying and legislating and recognizing sovereignty over these spaces, like in legal frameworks? I know there's efforts by the feds and other national governments to engage in plans to basically expand the national park system to the rest of the world, which in turn also means displacing Indigenous people. The places that are still healthy are our spaces, right? So like that is the solution making that I've seen that recognizes Indigenous people, which again just displaces Indigenous people. It's called the 30 by 30 effort or whatever. And I don't know. I see that as a complete misunderstanding and misinterpretation of how we are able to collectively address climate crisis in a real way. The land back work that's happening, the recognition of sovereignty of Indigenous peoples over our homelands, I think that is such a crucial and critical part of addressing climate change, and at least at a minimum preparing a generation of folks like yourself. I can tell you're a very young person. I have a little 19-month-old. I mean, it's thinking about what is coming and how do we prepare ourselves for that, and still fight for the world that we want to see and build the world that we are in, right? I think that work is so critically important. So all the folks doing land back work out there.
Montana's Lee Enterprises provides the state with the news through its 5 publications. It is out with a new series that examines why Montana's Native American people die an entire generation younger than their white neighbors. I interviewed Nora Mabie, the reporter behind Gone Too Soon.
Nora, I want to start off with the number 55.8, and that's actually the average age of life expectancy for citizens of the Crow Nation in Montana. But put that number into context for us in relation to other tribal nations, and of course with the non-native population in the state of Montana.
Sure. Yeah, the numbers are very shocking when you look at them together. So, in Montana, white people on average die at 78. Rural white Montanans die at 78. So it doesn't matter where they live. And then the average life expectancy for Native Americans in Montana is 61. So that's 17 years younger than the average white Montanan. And then, like you mentioned, on certain reservations, that gap really widens, like on the Crow Reservation. But then on the Fort Peck Reservation as well, the average age at which Native Americans die is 52. So it's almost 30 years different than white Montanans. Yeah, and even in Fort Belknap, although the data isn't as up to date, a Native American man in Blaine County would live to 53, whereas a white man in the same county on average lives to 83. So it's a huge difference, and it really doesn't matter where white people live in Montana, they're still living longer.
And in the first story that you filed in the Gone Too Soon series, you actually look at why these numbers are so low. So I want you to jump into the barriers that Native people face in terms of just being able to live to an age like 75 or 76.
Most reservations in Montana are food deserts, so that means most people don't have access to affordable and healthy foods. Distance to care is a huge problem. Some people can live hundreds of miles each way to have to travel to a doctor's appointment for something like cancer or dialysis. And, most tribal communities in Montana face poverty. So that means if you have to travel for care, then you would need a reliable vehicle, money for gas, time off work, and those are really significant barriers. Also, the weather here is a big problem. So people end up missing their appointments for all sorts of reasons. And then there's also, policy past and present that makes things harder. The Indian Health Service has struggled to provide adequate care and receive adequate funding. And then there's present policies that make things harder as well. And I've talked to several people who say they face discrimination at the doctor's office. So all of these things can really deter someone from getting the care that they need to live a quality life.
In order to write and report these stories, it took a lot of resources. So tell us exactly what went into this reporting.
Yeah, it was a big project. I worked on this for 6 months, and I got support from the USC Annenberg Center for Health Journalism. They, provided some financial support and mentorship, which was really helpful. But what I did is I spent a week of time on each of the 3 reservations that I focused on. In the end, I kind of calculated it all, and I think I talked to 293 Indigenous people in Montana who provided input for this project, which was really important because this is a really big topic when you're talking about people dying almost 20 years sooner than others. And I really wanted tribal communities to feel accurately represented, and I wanted this work to be meaningful to them.
Nora, this is all really important reporting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Languages are among our most valued resources. Ensuring that they are preserved and taught is important in Indigenous communities and here at ICT. So we're bringing you a new segment called Language Breaks. They will feature speakers from across Turtle Island sharing their beautiful and bold words and phrases. This week, we bring you a taste of Passamaquoddy from the Wabanaki Nation in the state of Maine.
Woolgiskud, Woolgiskud, good weather. Wool is good. Giskud is what the weather is like. So you put Woolgiskud and you'll have good weather.
The history of boarding schools is complex and yet very personal for many Indigenous people. ICT national correspondent Mary Annette Pember is taking a deep dive into history close to home. She spoke with ICT senior producer Shirley Snavy after being off the beat for a year. Take a listen.
Mary Annette Pember, it's so great to see you. You've been on sabbatical for a year, and welcome back to ICT. Well, I was writing a book. I was blessed to get a book contract and writing a book about boarding schools and my framed through my family's experience. My mother and my grandparents and all my aunts and uncles and some of my cousins all went to the sister school, which is the Catholic Indian boarding school on the Bad River Reservation in Wisconsin. I've been writing about boarding schools certainly, since the 90s. And, I always joke that I couldn't get arrested doing the work for years. And finally, the world beat a path to my door, and lived long enough to where people are interested in reading about it.
A lot has changed over the years about our understanding about boarding schools. What strikes you as most telling about the boarding school history?
Well, I think that non-Indians are suddenly aware of it. Although we've been hollering about it for a really long time. They have been able to ignore it pretty effectively. Over the years, I would talk to non-Native people, and they would have no idea about the history. But of course, there's certainly not a Native family that in my acquaintance who doesn't have some sort of connection. So in Indian country, it's very well known. So the biggest thing is that suddenly non-natives are aware that Indians went to boarding schools, and that it was not always a favorable experience.
Now you're back, and what kinds of stories are you working on now?
Well, not surprisingly, I'm actually going to publish some of the findings that I got when I encountered when I was on the leave. I got to learn so much more about the history just of Native people, and particularly in the last part of the 19th century. It was just a profound time of change for Native folks, and that we have been able to survive all of that to the degree that we have culturally and language and just physically is nothing short of remarkable. And I think, that has really impressed the heck out of me. So I am writing about, I got to learn some very important information about boarding school deaths. There's been a lot of attention on the cemeteries and the number of children buried at the cemeteries, particularly because of the news that came out of Canada and the residential schools. And they started finding these cemeteries that probably the markers had long since, been weathered away. And they found this huge number of children who had died, and it brought attention. But what we're finding in the U.S. in particular, as we're looking back, it became a problem almost immediately. Kids began to die within, like, for instance, at Carlisle, oh my gosh, within like 6 months. And Lieutenant Pratt was not happy with that. And rather than have these deaths on the books of, this was his great dream, this was his grand plan, and he was a real cheerleader for it. So rather than have that reflected, he started sending children home when they were mortally ill. Particularly tuberculosis was the greatest killer. And that was instrumental in also sharing the disease with a lot of Native communities. And it contributed to a large loss of life. We're particularly between 1870 to 1900. And of course, TB continued to be a problem into the 20th century. But what I was just shocked at was the way of deaths associated clearly with boarding school attendance with children coming back home.
And now the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, is suing the federal government over the Carlisle graves and the return of those. And so I wonder how the outcome will be of that and what the logic is behind that.
It's actually the Army. It's an Army barracks. It houses the Army College. But there's another agency. It's a relatively newer agency called Army Cemeteries, and they have very sort of specific rules. It was created actually in response to a scandal apparently that occurred in the latter part of the 20th century at Arlington Cemetery, and it was about really I guess they just really were not careful at all in the way that they treated the soldiers' remains, and a whistleblower came forward. And as a result, they created this Army Cemeteries agency, which is all about really this whole chain of responsibility. And I think, they claim that they aren't subject to NAGPRA, that it's that it's separate, and that it's really just as part of these cemeteries that it has to be through a descendant that must claim the remains first. So that's the rub. And their mission is they feel pretty strongly about their mission, particularly since they're a relatively new agency. So that's what's happening. And as you imagine, the military is quite stringent about their regulations. But it's becoming a thing. And that little cemetery, it's like under 100 children are buried. And for many years, it sat at the absolute back of the barracks. But because of 9/11, they changed the entrance, and so it's directly across the street. So actually, I'll just sort of share my lead. It's sort of a daily j'accuse from these children, about the poor conditions and how so many children died. And it's like they're begging investigation, and I think they didn't really count on that happening. And I think that initially they were caught kind of flat-footed, but I think they're seeing that they've got to come up with something because it's a very high profile issue.
Well, thank you, Mary Annette Pember, and welcome back to ICT.
Thank you so much, Shirley. Glad to be back.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.